All right, guys, on today's episode of Online Finds, we're going to talk about silicone wire. Um, so another one of my regular purchases from AliExpress. Again, as I mentioned before, I will link everything in the description for you to purchase. This is my go-to. I do a lot of electronics projects. I do a lot of my crawler stuff. I've shown you this before. My go-to wiring is always silicone wiring, and I'll tell you why. So, first of all, a couple examples. So I market a product called Neo Luminate for Mazda Miatas, which is this rear dynamic LED, RGB LED light strip, and it's silicone, obviously, but I custom make these, and the wiring I use is silicone. I can seal it. It's very flexible. And it's got a lot of advantages. So let me sort of dive into it a little bit more here. They come in many different, shapes and sizes. So, I buy separate high gauge. This is, I think, 28 gauge, maybe 20, or maybe 30 wiring. So, you can always tell. Fortunately, you got to order it before you know what you're getting, because some of them pretend to be this, but they're not, or they're either solid core inside with silicone outside, or some mix of that, right? And there's a lot of junk out there. But this is the real deal, and I sort of have my go-to suppliers that I use regularly. You can also buy, wiring that is, multi-cord. So this is my main one is it's a 3-core wire that I use. Again, a lot of the LED work, stuff I do in my crawlers, as well as the Neo Luminate is all 3-wired. So there's, again, I think that's about a 26 gauge on this. But basically, the key is the outer shield or the outer sheath is very flexible, and it's silicone, as well as the inner, and that's probably the more important part, is the inner, because one of the biggest advantages is soldering. For those of you that probably if you've done a lot of soldering, you'll know that when you just get sort of regular wire, you can't heat the wire very long before the outer sheath starts to melt away, and suddenly your plans to solder a wire and connect it and make sure you've got a good seal, and not even using shrink tubing, is you don't want it to pull away, because then you might have to redo it. So this stuff, awesome, right? It does not melt. It takes a heck of a lot to melt this stuff. So it can handle that. So again, this is my go-to. You can get these, and again, links in the description, but you can get anywhere from 1 core, single core obviously, to up to, I think, 6, maybe even 8 core. Obviously the outer diameter will be bigger, but you can get all sorts of combinations of that. Also, something to keep in mind, that the inner wire itself is not a solid core. That would make it pretty stiff, and I never get solid core. I get stranded core. So, and most all of them are that, but you definitely need to read the link. But the links I'll include here are the sort of the stranded core. So again, flexibility and versatility. Another quick example here, that's a 3-core, heavier gauge internal 3-core wire, probably about a 22, maybe 24 gauge wire, just for higher current draws. But again, in the RC world, and most of my work I do with ESP32s, it's not high current stuff, and anywhere from probably 24 to 28 gauge is more than effective, unless you're doing LED light strips that are longer than a meter, and the current draw starts to push over a couple amps. But even for my crawler stuff, the total LED light draw of this guy is only, for all the LEDs, is maybe 1 amp tops, and I have obviously multiple wires because they're all separate, so not a problem. Anyway, links in the description. I'm going to keep doing these possibly every week, so please subscribe. I do appreciate a like. And again, check my links, because I've got all kinds of other stuff in the space of links to products, in the space of my RC crawling hobby, all of my ESP32 Arduino type project work, obviously, this wiring and whatnot. So tag along. There should be some fun stuff coming. Thanks.